It was a Thursday when the house finally felt like mine. Mara, my mother, was on a late shift, my brothers away at college, and the rooms hummed like something waiting. I had friends over. We watched a baseball game and drank too many beers. When they left through the back door, the house folded into silence. I packed the leftover bottles into the fridge, climbed upstairs, and lay in bed counting nothing. The house made its usual noises, the refrigerator's cough, pipes settling, the floor's old complaints. Footsteps padded up the stairs, stopped outside my door. I pictured Mara's silhouette, her slump in the doorway. A cough. Then the kitchen erupted. Cabinets, clattering dishes. Too tired to protest, I texted, "Please stop making so much noise." I turned onto my side. The hallway light was off, the doorway a black mouth. Then other steps returned, closer, quicker. My bedroom door opened, and a figure filled the frame. In the thin streetlight, it read like my mother's shape. Slouched. Familiar. I snapped, "Stop making so much damn noise." No answer. My phone vibrated. A text. Mara still at work. My throat tightened. The figure at the doorway didn't move. I tried to act normal. "Mom, I'm trying to sleep." "Get out," I said, voice brittle. When she stayed, I texted my mother in a panic. "There's someone in the house. Call the police." "Okay," she replied. A new sound cut the air. A rough, repeated phrase. "Don't know where to go," mumbled close, like breath scraping wood. It grew louder, nearer. I fumbled for the lamp. The light revealed a small, bent woman at the foot of my bed. Hair like white wire, and hands like dried roots reaching toward me. Her skin folded into maps, her voice frayed into a plea. "I freeze, don't know where to go," she whispered. Fear shoved me up. I screamed, "Get back," and ran. I slammed the bedroom door and pressed my weight against it. On the other side, she thudded and scraped. Nails scored the paint. "I need to get out," she wailed, pounding until the door shook. My mother called, but my fingers wouldn't manage the phone. I braced until my arms burned. The banging never stopped until officers knocked sharply at the front door. I ran down, opened it, and the police rushed in. They pinned the woman to the wall, cuffed her, and led her outside into the flashing red and blue. She stared past us with blown pupils, like someone who'd been walking in circles for years. The officer said she'd need evaluation. They suspected mental illness. They said it with the calm of people who deal with such nights, often words that try to compress the oddness back into something explainable. After the cruiser lights peeled away, I learned how she'd come inside. The back door my friends used had been left unlocked. A small oversight, a hinge swinging open that let her fold into my night. That fact lodged in me. Now small sounds rewire me. A drawer becomes a footstep, a vent, a whisper. A single creak can push cold into my limbs, make me bolt upright, searching the doorway. Once, months later, I woke to a soft scratch and convinced myself it was her. It was only the cat relief, thin as paper. Daylight doesn't dissolve the memory. I still check the locks twice and listen to the house's tiny noises as if tuning a radio for static. That night left a bruise. The reaching hands, the rasping words, the way a human shape can feel wrong. Sometimes I wonder which is worse, the world itself, or the versions of it that nearly walk through your door. The house seemed smaller after the police left, as though the walls leaned inward, pressing me toward the center. I sat on the couch with every light on, staring at the dark reflection of myself in the television screen. The silence was thick, a living thing that shifted when I breathed. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed faintly and then dissolved into the night. I thought about the woman's words. Don't know where to go. They didn't feel random. The phrase clawed at my thoughts, repeating, folding into itself. Why here? Why my house? I imagined her wandering through backyards, slipping across porches, pressing her face against windows before finding mine open. When I finally dared to climb back upstairs, each step seemed louder than it should. The stairwell groaned under my weight, and the air carried the faint smell of metal like old coins or rust. My bedroom door was still scarred, the paint chipped where she'd scraped and pounded. I shut it quickly and leaned against it again, though this time nothing pressed back. Sleep never came. Shadows at the edges of the room writhed like they had weight, and every passing car outside painted stripes of light that seemed to pause too long on my walls. I kept hearing her cough, even though she was gone. Once, I swore I heard the fragile creak of footsteps just beyond the door. I sat upright, holding my phone in one hand and a lamp base in the other, heart hammering as I waited for the knob to turn. Nothing did. But when exhaustion finally dragged me down, dreams surged in her place. I saw the hallway in endless loop, her figure always standing in the doorway, bent and silent until I blinked, and then rushing at me, whispering that same broken line. I woke with a strangled yell, the taste of iron in my mouth, convinced I wasn't alone. Morning didn't bring comfort. In daylight, the house looked ordinary again, like nothing had ever happened. But when I touched the chipped wood of my doorframe, the raw edge of paint under my finger, I knew it wasn't just a nightmare. The damage was proof. At the kitchen table, I traced the condensation ring left by a beer bottle from the night before. It seemed like another world, friends, laughter, the hum of a game on TV. That version of my life had ended the moment the back door clicked open for her. Still, a part of me kept circling the question, why had she come upstairs? Why had she chosen me? Maybe she wasn't just lost. Maybe she was searching. The thought sat like a stone in my gut, immovable. The next nights were worse. I thought that once the police took her away, the house would breathe easy again. Instead, it seemed to listen. Every floorboard pop, every faint whistle through the windows carried the echo of her voice. My brain had learned her cadence, and now it filled in the silence with whispers. I tried music, television, even leaving the lights on, but nothing disguised the sensation of being watched. Shadows seemed heavier near the corners. Sometimes I caught movements where none should be, like someone stepping back just out of sight when I turned my head. On the fourth night, it returned in a form I couldn't dismiss. Around 2 a.m., I heard the kitchen cabinets slamming, one after another, in sharp rhythm. My chest tightened. I remembered the first night, the racket I thought was my mother. I grabbed the lamp base again, creeping down the hall. The kitchen was dark except for the glow from the street. All the cabinet doors stood wide open, swaying gently as though they had been pulled all at once. My pulse drummed in my ears. I whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" The sound of my own voice seemed foreign, shaky, almost too loud. A cough answered. Not from a corner, not from the window, but right behind me. I spun, slamming the lamp base against the wall, and the bulb shattered with a pop. The hallway behind me was empty, but I felt the cold exhale of air across my neck. I staggered backward, fumbled for my phone, and in that moment the phrase came again, rough, guttural. Don't know where to go. It came from the stairwell, a rasp echoing upward. The sound bent my body into panic before I could think. I ran, bolted into my bedroom, and locked the door. But this time she didn't pound. Instead, her voice seeped through the cracks in the door, softer but relentless. Don't know where to go. Don't know where to go. It looped like a chant, growing tighter around my thoughts. I pressed my palms to my ears until they hurt, but it only seemed to come from inside now. At some point, I must have blacked out from exhaustion, because when I opened my eyes again, sunlight was spilling across the floor. The chanting was gone. The hallway was quiet. But when I crept out, one of the cabinet doors downstairs was lying on the tile, torn clean off its hinges. The police later told me no one had been booked into custody that matched her description. We're still looking, they said, which meant the woman who clawed at my door was never in their system, never processed, never safely away. And yet the scratch marks remained on my frame. The cabinet lay broken, the words still scrawled across my nights. The nights kept folding over themselves like pages of a book I could not close. Each morning the sun pulled the curtains aside and promised daylight would stitch the edges back together, but the stitches never held. Small things had migrated from being frightening to being inevitable. The cough that echoed in empty rooms, the scent of metal that clung to the air like a second shadow, the way the house seemed to inhale when I entered and exhale when I left. Sleep had become a gamble I always lost. One evening I decided I wouldn't be timid any longer. I set a recorder in the hallway, a cheap voice app running on my phone, and left it recording while I sat in the living room with my hands clenched around a mug of cold coffee. I told myself I would catch a noise and finally have proof. Something physical to hand to someone who would make it stop. The house hummed. The television showed late-night reruns I didn't watch. The clock ticked. I listened until my ears buzzed. Around 2:30, the house began its familiar punctuation, a soft scrape from the back door, a low cough that was almost a sob, and then the phrase patched together like broken glass. The voice wasn't just coming from one place anymore. It seemed woven through the walls, riding the pipes, curling around the banister. Don't know where to go, it said, over and over, until the words stopped being words and became a thudding presence in my chest. I walked toward the stairwell. Light from the street made a thin stripe across the floor, and within it the dust looked like a slow tide. I moved deliberately, each footfall measured. On the third step, something shifted at the edge of my vision like cloth being pulled away. I turned. A shape, impossibly thin, wrapped in gray that didn't catch light, hovered at the landing. Its head cocked, as though listening to a radio only it could hear. For a breath, I thought it was the old woman. For another, my mind offered explanations. A coat on the banister, a trick of moonlight. Then it moved. Not with legs, but with the slow, patient glide of a tree branch in a windless night. It leaned toward me, and the air turned metallic. My mouth filled with the taste of pennies. It opened a mouth that was more shadow than flesh and whispered the phrase with the same ragged rhythm. But under the words was something else, like a map being read aloud, naming rooms and hours and small betrayals. Window, cupboard, back door. The voice layered them like a list of stops. My hand shook so hard I dropped the mug. It shattered at the base of the stairs, porcelain and coffee exploding outward like a small constellation. The sound should have been ordinary, but the house answered with the patter of tiny feet overhead, feet that stopped, then began again as if circling. The shadow at the landing tilted toward the top of my head, and for a fraction of a second I heard, crisp and very near, a child's giggle folded inside the old woman's rasp. The amalgam of wrong ages and wrong sounds made my vision swim. I ran, not upstairs away, out into the yard beneath that thin ribbon of sky, barefoot on cold concrete, heart punching my ribs. The neighbor's porch light blinked, indifferent. Cars went by on Hemlock Road, their drivers oblivious. I shouted for them, "Help! There's someone in my house." But my voice came out small and flat, swallowed by distance. When the police finally arrived, it was the same two officers as before, their uniforms creased, their faces set in tired lines. They found nothing at first glance, no one on the porch, no one in the yard. They checked the house with flashlights and radioed that the place was clear, an administrative word that made my chest hollow. Then one of them paused on the staircase. The wood there was smeared with something that had dried in a pattern like a handprint and then stretched. What looked like fingerprints dragged into long, thin streaks, as if someone had tried to climb and been pulled sideways. They took pictures. They took my statement again. They promised to step up patrols. The officers spoke in the language of procedure, while my skin kept waiting for something else to happen. Another whisper, another scrape, the soft insistence of presence. For weeks, the house was under a kind of siege. Doors double locked, lights left on, curtains drawn. I slept in the living room with every possible barrier between me and the hallway. Sometimes the sound would come and die on the other side of the couch, a hesitant rustle, the echo of a footfall, and I would hold my breath until my lungs burned. Other nights were worse, filled with internal images that stabbed like ice. The old woman's face inches from mine in the dark, her breath a cold halo, or the shape of many faces pressed just beyond the pane of glass, watching me in the flat, unwavering way people watch through a train window. The novelty of terror gave way to a slow erosion. My friends stopped staying over. They said they couldn't sleep in my house, and the irony of their distance felt like nails. Mara started coming home between shifts when she could, or if she couldn't, she called and stayed on the line while I fell apart into the night. Once I tried to sleep with the porch light on, and in the amber circle outside, a pair of eyes reflected back at me, too high for a dog, too level for a human. They blinked once, and were gone. I imagined them moving along the fence like moths, watching. Months later, a phone call arrived. A social worker had tracked down records. An elderly woman had been living rough in a neighboring district for some time, unregistered and missed by welfare checks. Someone had reported seeing her move through yards late at night. They thought she might be the one. It felt like a conclusion, until the social worker added her own hesitant note. People she encountered described not one person but sometimes many, like surfaces of a single thing reflected in different frames. The language of officialdom fumbled at the edges of what had happened and could not describe all of it. That was when the house did something I never expected. On a rain-heavy morning, after weeks of tension and shutters and plastic tarps over the windows, I went to open the back door half mad with the need for fresh air. The lock clicked easily. The porch mat lay where it always had, but when I stepped onto the stoop, the world that met me was slightly off. A single footprint in the dirt, too narrow at the heel and splayed at the toes, as if some foot had been strangled by its shoe. A smear across the railing like something that had dragged itself up, and perched on the top step, small and deliberate, a child's drawing crayon on paper of a house with a single crooked window and a swung-open door. On the front of the paper someone had written, in a shaky hand that wasn't mine, "Don't know where to go." Wasn't a tidy ending. There was no arrest with handcuffs clanging, no neat report with boxes ticked. The scar remained, the chipped paint on the jamb, the dent in the stair rail, the way my nights folded into waiting. But life moved forward in the blunt, stubborn way it always does. I moved the recorder files to a folder, played them sometimes when the doubt rose, and heard the old woman's voice threaded with other sounds. Local radio, a dog barking, the clink of dishes, and wondered which parts were real and which were memory carving itself sharper. The last image I carry is simple and bright and wrong. A sliver of daylight sneaking under my bedroom door, catching a single dust mote as if to say everything was ordinary again. And for a second, I believed it. Then the dust mote shuddered, elongated like a thin finger, and crawled along the beam of light toward the crack. It paused there, right at the edge of morning, and the whisper came, not from the hall, not from the stairs, but from the wood itself. Don't know where to go.